everyone, and welcome to Writers Drinking Coffee. This is a podcast where writers sit around drinking tasty beverages and talking about publishing, and the whole creative process. There will be rants and raves and opinions that may not agree but are lovingly delivered. We do not censor ourselves, so consider us PG-13. Your fan base today includes Chaz Brenchley and me, Jeannie Warner. This is episode 183, Journey Back to Liadon. Welcome back to Liadon. This is with Sharon Lee and Steve Miller. We're glad to have you back.
Hello, we're glad to be back. 184 episodes. Congratulations.
Oh, you're 183, so coming
183, okay.
It seems like just yesterday we were sitting around in a coffee shop singing, sometimes we're funny. We should record this.
And it's worked for a long time.
Oddly, yes. I think we've become an odd circuit for many people because somebody is like, well, I'm not famous enough to be on your show. And I just say, I don't care. We're here to talk about writing and publishing and the whole creative process. So everything, if you need to eat Twizzlers and tuck a loaf of French bread under your wine and open your laptop and stare at a blank page and close it again, that's all part of writing, right?
Yes, that's all part of writing.
All part of writing. And thinking to yourself, I should write, and then cleaning your house, that's part of writing.
Sharon used to tell people she could tell when I was really working hard on a story because I would start with the dishes and I'd be cleaning for a while.
There is a lot of deep thought that can come about while one is doing dishes. Between dishes and cleaning spinach, I wrote most of a musical once during college.
I miss working in an office because the best way to think about a story is to do collation. Walking around the table, sorting papers.
I can see that. So we are here to celebrate today Salvage Right. Is it Salvage Right or Salvage Rights?
Salvage Right.
Salvage Right. Interesting title. My question is, I immediately thought of, derelict vessels hanging in space, but on the other hand, salvage right sounds almost like something handed down from mother to daughter. I give you salvage right.
I give you salvage right.
Well,
okay. In case the family ship blows up, you get to come back and take what's left. That works.
Exactly.
And in an odd way, it's not inappropriate for the book to hand, because the thing being salvaged in Salvage Right is not a spaceship, but rather a space station. And the space station has a history that goes in the family and through the family, through blood, if you will. That Salvage Right actually would almost work that way too. I don't see why not.
Well, now I'm imagining an interstellar lawyer saying, okay, I'm going to need the orbital trajectory mathematical points of said space station if you want to insure it and make sure that you're passing on, salvage and recycling rights. So I dig it.
Well, that's a good thing, because this space station used to pass in between two universes. The old universe that the ancestors of the people that we write about escaped from many years ago, and the universe that they escaped to. And now that it's fixed in space, it can be insured, among other pleasantries.
Oh, wow. So you have like the spaceship at the end of or space station at the end of the universe there too.
Oh, the space station straddling two universes, yes.
Yes.
That has almost a flavor of Callahan. Is there a bar?
Is there a bar? Not yet.
Okay.
The station is in pretty bad shape at the beginning. It's very old, and the AI that used to inhabit it was
terminated.
Well, was trying to control two people who were on station as the light keepers, who had inserted themselves between the intelligence of the space station and the rest of the universe. The object of the space station being that it was going to take over the universe, and it had a good shot of doing that.
Okay, and timeline-wise, help me out here. Is this Clan Corval?
This is Clan Corval. This
Okay.
is the book directly after Neogenesis.
Directly after Neogenesis. So I had to look it up once, and I was like, is this technically before accepting the lance or after?
Neogenesis, the events in Neogenesis happen before accepting the lance.
Right.
This happens just about the same time as accepting the lance.
Fair enough. I would just like to kind of set it in my head of like which threads I'm going down. It's important. You guys have a complicated.
No, it is. And because we're writing on several different fronts, things can happen at the same time in two different places, and that's what we have here.
Absolutely. So we have Space Station. We have Edge of Two Universes. Is there a touch of romance? I love your touches of romance.
Especially for me, there's a married couple in this one.
Nice.
And
A nice married couple, right, Steve?
A strange married couple. There's a married couple. There's some
Partner building.
Interplay. There's some interplay between comrades.
Some people take their relationship to the next level, whatever that means.
Yeah, and so there's a not romance in the Breakfast at Tiffany's style or anything. I mean,
I don't know. I'm always imagining take our relationship to the next level. I'm like, you might mean moving in together. You might mean admitting to your parents that you're dated. It might mean the sharing your toothbrush, but that could also be a step too far.
When Steve and I moved in together many, many years ago, I called my mom to tell her that I was indeed going to do what she had nagged me to do ever since I had moved out of the house. I was going to get a roommate. And she said to me, "Oh, that's lovely. What is her name?" And I said, "Steve." Bye, Mom. Love you.
And yeah, that was an interesting span in our life. The hardest thing about those first few days together was getting the cats in, because one of the cats escaped. Just as we were leaving for Balticon. Understand, we moved in together the day of Balticon starting, so we needed to get the cats in together, get everything in,
We go to the convention.
and then go off to the convention.
How do you introduce two strange cats into the same household and then run away? I mean, it sounds like useful, but
We didn't know any better because I had been living with Archie and Steve had been living with Arwen, and neither one of them had to adapt to another cat. And so there was the shock value of them coming face to face and going, "What is that?" And I think that actually bridged a lot of possible hostility, because by the time they figured out they were both cats, they were hungry and they wanted to go find something to eat.
that seems fair.
And also at that point, we weren't there. They had smelled each other probably over the weeks and even month or two beforehand. So they probably had some sense that, I was
going off and visiting a strange cat.
Now I love that you put cats in a lot of your different stories. Like, what wasn't there one that actually kind of owned a repair shop practically?
Well, yeah, there was Patch, who owned in Jolly's repair shop, and for quite some time.
Is there a cat who wanders and owns the space station, keeps it rat free?
One would not want a cat on the space station as it had been. However, one of the ships that comes in, Bishimo, has two cats on it and a Norbert. So they are not without feline supervision.
Cats are important. I think we were just musing to ourselves, how many cats have figured prominently through science fiction in years past? I mean, The Door into Summer,
I think that's the classic one, and I can't go before that and think, well, there's a cat, unless it's one of the young adult or children's books might have had Mrs. Pickerel, but I don't recall Mrs. Pickerel taking it.
I don't remember Mrs. Pickerel having cats.
Well, I guess there's been in fantasy too, because from the movies as a kid, I wanted to name a cat Pyewacket one day.
Yes.
But
well, Pyewacket is a classic name. Yes.
And Bell Book and Candle, have you seen Bell Book and Candle recently?
I have not seen it recently.
I loved it, and then I saw it, I don't know, a while back, and was horrified. It was one of those things. It was one of those things that I shouldn't have watched it again.
Yeah.
Right. I remember Witch Mountain had a cat too, didn't it? Escape to Witch Mountain.
Yes.
There's a lot of cat opportunity. If cats domesticated themselves, there's absolutely no reason they couldn't decide to explore space and help their humans along.
You would think that would be too fatiguing for them, but they're going to sleep anyway, so maybe not.
Well, they let the dog go first, and I respect that. If somebody's going to find out if those tin cans human produce are decent, push the dog, make the dog go first. But
You can't see the Pepsi all over my keyboard there. Oh boy.
There's a cat in Alien.
Yes, there is a
There
cat
we
in
go.
Alien. The hero of the movie.
so that's what I mean. I was trying to think of dogs in science fiction, and all I came up with was a boy and his dog.
That counts.
Well, yeah.
Wasn't there a dog in several of the spin-offs to Robbie the Robot? Didn't that young? There were a couple of really silly spin-offs that used Robbie the Robot on Earth, and I think there was.
There's an opportunity. Space dog.
But I don't recall them. I don't recall any of them having primacy the way some of the cats seem to manage.
Well, what can if there aren't a cat in particular in Salvage Rights, what can you tell us about expecting from the latest? What new adventures are we looking for?
I'm sorry, because we're writers, there's a book that's just come out, which is Salvage Right, and there's the books that we're working on.
Salvage Right.
Salvage Right has two cats. And I'm going to completely block on the cats because I want their names. And a Norbear named Hevelin. They come in on Bashimo, which is a sentient spaceship, and also the ambassadorial vessel for the Norbear ambassador. Cats in the Liadon universe don't usually travel on spaceships, or haven't traveled recently on Corval spaceships. So the fact that Theo has two cats is kind of notable, but she has not let them out onto the space station. The space station is a very strange place, and weird things happen. And you wouldn't want to risk your cats.
I can see that.
Any self-respecting cat would try to get out anyway, though.
Well, that's exactly true. They would try to get out, but your job is to keep them in.
Well, testing boundaries is important. You need to understand, where the safe places are, and how do you know that if somebody doesn't shoo you away from something?
The advantage on the part of everybody else here is that Bashimo is being alert himself and having an additional AI on board with him are pretty well able to.
Yes, doors can close without anybody being in the room.
It's true. It's true. Well, this is convention season. Where can people come to meet you and get your copies of your book signed this year?
Oh, wow. Well, you
just missed us at New Jersey at Heliosphere. And the next con is Astronomicon in Rochester. That's in October. This summer we're finishing 2 books, so we're not traveling.
I would like to finish 2 books. That sounds good.
Yeah, staying home and being good writers.
We had vaguely been thinking that we would go to Pemicon.
Pemicon.
Yes.
I don't think I know Pemicon. Where's that one?
It's the next one.
Pemicon is the National Science Fiction Convention that's going on right now. It happens to be going on in Winnipeg. And let's see, Tanya Huff is the guest of honor there.
Oh, I adore her.
Gee whiz. But we had thought we would be able to do it, but there were other...
That would be a great train trip.
But
Into Winnipeg.
we weren't able to...
I was
Go
going to
ahead.
say, do you prefer the smaller cons or the bigger cons like WorldCon, Dragon Con, Genghis Con. Are you?
Genghis was okay. You had to get to know him. But no, WorldCon's too big.
WorldCon is about the far edge of what we want. Dragon Con is absurd. It's much too large. I had a really heartrending experience at Dragon Con.
No.
We only went for the one.
Yep. And we went to Dragon Con, and they had 2 floors of dealer's room at Dragon Con.
2 floors.
There were 2 floors of dealer's room, and there was, in effect, an executive dealer's room, and then a dealer's room where they shoved everybody in. I'm probably going to be upsetting people by putting it this way. They shoved everybody in who was willing to take a 4x4 table space side by side.
There was literally no room to move. It was a maze.
Once you entered the room, the only way you could get out was by going through, following the entire maze around the room in more or less in order, without around all the things. And at that time, there was Lou Ferrano was one of the people, and he was standing behind the table signing his photographs. And also behind the table there was Peter Beagle. And it was like he was chained to the table. The only thing he could do was stand behind the table. He didn't have room to move.
And you didn't have room to sit. It was, not a place for someone with claustrophobia.
It was kind of sad, because I was looking at these people desperately trying to sell their photographs to people. That was not exactly what...
No, Peter was selling books.
Peter was there. But Peter Beagle was selling books. But Peter Beagle had been one of my mentors when I went to Clarion West in 1973. And it was like, I felt embarrassed for him to have to be shoved into this place where there was barely enough room for him, and he'd have to have applied to be able to be in the dealer's room. And I'm saying, this is Peter Beagle. What is he doing down here in the basement? So that was a feature of that particular convention that really, really bothered me. Now, there was a convention where we were there because Anne McCaffrey had sent us a note and said, "Oh, by the way, I'm going to be at Dragon Con, and so will you."
Oh, I see. Well,
that was a command performance. There was no reason, as far as I was concerned, to ever drive.
I understand. If Anne McCaffrey said, "Jeannie, you're going to go be here," then I would say, "Yes, ma'am." So, I respect that.
Yep.
Well, and Anne was a fan of the Liadon books, and she was a fan of cats, and she was a fan of Maine Coon cats. And we had Maine Coon cats, and we had Liadon books. So that all worked out well.
I could see it, yeah.
And she had, in fact, she had become annoyed with one of our publishers who had dropped us. And when another publisher came along, she sent them a picture of her and her coon cat. Go ahead.
And the stack of books on her to be read pile directly over her shoulder with Plan B by Sharon Lee and Steve Miller on the top. And I'm looking at this thing when she's going to get us in so much trouble. But because her publisher was the publisher who had dropped us, Del Rey.
Yeah.
So in any case, but we found then there at that Dragon Con, the same thing. They had us in the bomb-proof room in the basement.
That's where the writing track was, in the basement, in the bomb-proof rooms. And John Ringo had told me that they put us there because they realized how valuable writers were. So that in case of a nuclear attack, we would be safe.
So it was, but we have been to a couple of Comic-Con and Comic-Con style events. And we were just, if you can't move and you can't turn around.
And the old style cons are really about meeting and talking to people. It was just something you can't do with the really huge cons. You can hardly find yourself, much less your friends.
It's true. The big ones, I remember 30 minutes to cross the foyer in the hotel every time I went down.
Oh.
On the other hand, I got trapped in every morning at 7 a.m. Apparently, Liam McIntyre and I both needed coffee. And so went down and we were crushed against each other and his hand rested over mine. And I think I had his love child or something. He didn't know it. It was still a beautiful moment we got to share.
Okay.
So the smaller cons then, I also like some of the smaller cons out here. Have you ever been out here to BayCon or FogCon?
We were at Silicon.
Okay.
Silicon, the Silicon 3. And the schedule that year was, if I recall correctly, was against BayCon.
I never understand that.
Yeah, California is hard to get to. We did go to, I'm going to say one Worldcon, but it might have been two Worldcons. Steve, help me out in California. But by the time you take a train from Maine to California, by the time you get off the train, it's like it takes you 3 days to get your landmarks back. Oh.
I don't know whether to ask about your thoughts on the whole Chengdu Worldcon or not. There's part of me that says, why would anybody want to, much like why would anybody go to Qatar to watch soccer? Why would anybody go to these, repressive authoritarian countries?
Yeah, I had no interest in going to a Worldcon in China.
We would have needed to fly, and because of various experiences and some physical limitations, we just don't. And I am informed there was a Worldcon guest of honor who, upon arriving at Worldcon, was still so stricken by the panic attacks of flying that long, and it took days to recover from that. And taking that, I said, no, I would not go to an overseas Worldcon, simply just and call it comfort, but I wouldn't go in any case. It was not ever on our radar to go to China.
Yeah. Although I have to say I was a little sad that I had somewhat plans to go down to New Zealand because I freaking love New Zealand, but it got put off in the wrong way. And so the timing just is a terrible miss. What's your favorite con, Chaz?
My favorite con is in the US is FogCon. Our very, very small literary local convention. You have about 200 people, I think, though that again hasn't met since the pandemic. I also, of course, I have a favourite UK convention, which is FantasyCon, which is it's pretty much where my engagement with the whole convention circuit started. If you don't count the one where I met, there was a British science fiction con in Newcastle. So obviously I had to go to that. That was in the early 80s, and that's where I met Jeff Ryman. So it was kind of lovely. FantasyCon it pulls everybody in. You get the science fiction writers, the fantasy writers, and the horror writers particularly. And I love that.
Is PemmiCon one of the only that's dedicated to being science fiction convention in particular? Or I'm thinking of, there's a lot of cross-genre cons, but I'm trying to think of specifically science fiction.
Well, PemmiCon is a one-time event. It's a NASFIC, and they put it. They won the right to hold the NASFIC, which occurs every time the Worldcon is out of the country, is overseas, and so that's what PemmiCon is. I doubt that I don't think they're exclusively science fiction. Rather, they were trying to put together a show, as it were, an event for those of us who couldn't get to China.
That makes sense.
And they do that. We just found out that Buffalo will be holding the NASFIC in 2024.
Buffalo, we can get to.
So, yeah, we'll be able to get there without any problem. We generally drive to conventions that are within a day and an nth away from us, and otherwise we take the trains. And that has sort of limited us. We've been guests of honor at 25 conventions or so. And one of the necessities, if it's not within driving distance, is that they bring us by train. We have missed a couple of conventions because we weren't willing to fly. But it's best for everybody if I don't appear in a panic.
It entirely makes sure. And Buffalo's nice, and you could always sneak across the border to visit Niagara. It's lovely.
I've been looking for an excuse to get back to Niagara Falls, so this may be it.
Yeah, it might. we live within an hour of the Canadian border anyway, here in Maine, so that's fine. But yeah, the Buffalo, that sounds good, and that's what we're going to be sort of in that area when we go to Astronomicon. Yes,
Astronomicon, yes. Too many syllables.
Astronomicon I had it in October of this year. But the smaller conventions where you don't have 35,000 people on the floor at once are much better. And even the One Worldcon, Sharon was moderating a panel at One Worldcon, and I think she had 3,000 people in the room.
No, there were a lot of people, but Lois McMaster-Bujoe was the guest of honor for that Worldcon, and every single one of her fans went to every single one of her events.
That's fair. She's lovely. Yeah.
And we had people sitting on the floor and standing in the back, and I'm thinking, please do not let there be a fire marshal in this hallway.
Oh, I'm on the fence. I have a little bit of a love-hatred relationship with panels. On the one hand, I love them because sometimes I can go and listen and learn something entirely new. And then the one I went to Dragon Con, I stood up 4 times to argue that, well, it was about computer security. And I'm like, this is how I make my living, people. And before you hand wave something, I felt this is how Judy Tarr must feel when people talk about he went on his horse and he galloped for 12 hours straight,
Yeah, right. No,
I just feel like don't make such an easy mistake that somebody wants to throw your book across the room saying, oh, they didn't do any work at all.
No, the horse thing is something ongoing, of course. I helped keep a horse for a couple of years when I was younger. And when you have 40 horses abreast going through a passageway that's 12 feet wide, yeah, you have to wonder.
It's like the blocking. I mean, every once in a while, I find that if you ever read a book and you're like, wait, 1 second ago, you were standing over them with a candlestick in your head and Colonel Mustard was cowering. And then you just dropped it and you walked out of the room, which you had described as being 20 feet away. So that's like 3 steps and you were out of the room. And no.
This is you have identified the importance in writing of the 2 blank lines.
2 blank lines?
2 blank lines covers a multitude of sins. You hit Colonel Mustard over the head with the candlestick, you drop the candlestick, 2 blank lines, and you can be anywhere else.
Oh, I like it. Is that the sort of the 2-star thing or the 3-star thing I've also seen?
Yes. The hashtag that they sometimes put in between scenes.
There's a word. There is a word for the symbols that you use to denote the passage of time on the shift of scene, and I can never remember it, which drives me crazy every time it comes up in conversation, like now.
Well, then you shall look it up for me, and I'll put it in the liner notes.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, 2 blank lines. Be somewhere else. I like that, but it ruins your exit, I suppose. But if you're going to write a good exit, then write a good exit, right?
Right. But if you don't need the exit, if you just accomplished what you came to do, and now you can go down the hall and get coffee, why not just cut to the coffee?
Yeah.
And we had an editor who had explained to us that as far as he was concerned, there was the blank lines, there was a single star, a double star, and a single star meant if you had the blank lines, you could be right where you were. If there was a double star or more, you were someplace else and probably at a different time.
You took this to a high level.
Yes, he did.
I like it. Now I wonder if there's a whole web page of all of this that I've missed somewhere. Like, oh, I'm sorry. You cut back in time. You need a hashtag to go back in time. Or I don't know the standard editing rules there. We shall have to look it up because now I'm dying of curiosity. But that blocking is important. And it's one of those things I enjoy about your stories is that the last one I read, they were dancing and there was a dance in a scene and you made it clear. All the blocking was clear. And I could see where this person is. Somebody was watching from the bar slightly above here. And you just described those details instead of hand waving them. Or if they were only in your head and I couldn't see them in my head, then how do they get there? And I enjoy the way you two put the details in.
If we're seeing it, you should see it too. Yes, it's funny. There's another thing in writing called the telling detail.
The which detail? Say that again.
The telling detail.
Telling detail.
Yes, it is the detail that proves that you are in place. You don't have to tell all of the details, but you have to tell the right details.
I suppose if one said one was in Pittsburgh in 1894, all you'd have to say is it was hell with the lid off. The smoke was everywhere.
Okay. For people who would know that.
That could have been Bangor, Maine.
Oh, it was in the newspapers a few times, hell with the lid off. So you could people from Pennsylvania would know it, but
and so many things now take scholars. There's a series of books of which I am inordinately fond by Mary Laswell about three old ladies and the adventures they have. And this is right around World War II. And Mrs. Feely and the other two ladies live in California. Mrs. Feely lives up the hill from the tuna factory. And the very first time I read this book, she's talking about the fact that all of the Japanese workers at the tuna factory aren't there anymore. And I didn't realize until 10, 15 years later, that meant they had been moved to the camps because of World War II. And I'm like, oh, and this is a funny book, but that's telling detail.
That's neat. And yeah, that it's exactly perfect. Now I'm going to use that word in my head when I think of, look how that's where they did it there and that's where they did it there. So what a neat idea of, instead of having to say in the Rookback sector of Sagittarian, in a class C planet. Sorry, I'm just.
Which is all made up anyway.
But at least it was consistent every time.
Yes, consistency helps.
Yeah, I mean if you said he sat down at the restaurant, they brought him his meal, and damn, the Old Bay was empty.
Oh yeah.
So okay, if you're doing a mystery in Baltimore or in Maryland, there might be Old Bay on the table. Okay, fine. That's one of those kind of details too.
I will have you know that on the 4th floor of an unremarkable office building in Foster City, California, back in the marketing department, there is a little can of Old Bay in the top drawer.
Good to know it's there.
I mean, if you ever happen to be randomly in Foster City on the 4th floor of an office building that's mostly deserted.
We'll keep that in mind.
So if you're going off to you said like next year, it looked like in July was the big NASFAC. You're going to have 2 new books by then? What are you working on?
We're working on, let's see, Salvage Right was the 25th book in the Liadon series. I am working on the book that we should have been working on when we wrote Salvage Right, which now has a title. It's called Ribbon Dance. And
it's called The Grinning Man?
Ribbon Dance.
Ribbon Dance.
Ribbon Dance. It's due at the end of this month, so no pressure.
No pressure.
Steve is writing the 27th Liadon book, which is due all the way out in November. I don't think they'll both be scheduled for 2024.
No, and we're not sure of the date right now. I think the date for Ribbon Dance is probably summer.
Probably summer, yeah.
Probably.
I think that's the date that we have received from the publisher.
I'm just delighted at the rigor and the discipline that you guys have when you're sitting down to write it. And you're like, nope, I'm going to have a book and it's going to be done by this time. That's beautiful. How do you do it?
No, I don't know how we do it.
We're sitting here laughing, thinking, oh, God.
Rigor.
It's very often the way the books come together is surprising. We have had books that more or less follow what looks like an outline, and thus you know where you're going. And we have other books which every time you try to say, then this happens after this, right? They say, no, wait a minute. Oh, wait a minute. That can't happen. Then we have, and
then you have books. Then you have books like Savage Right, which basically we weren't supposed to be working on. I was supposed to be working on Ribbon Dance, and this idea was in the way. So I said, well, and this is the downfall of many a good writer, I'll just write a couple hundred words.
I like it.
The next thing I knew, my head was full of characters. They were all shouting, big party at Tensori Light. And it just galloped. So there was no outline, no idea what I was doing. The characters totally took it over. So that was kind of a gift for that one. Ribbon Dance wants to count all of the nails and see if my hammers are sharp, and they're much less exuberant presenting book.
We did have one book, and this was the result of carelessly having put a set of dates in two places in the book.
Yeah, we try not to do anything.
The week before the book was absolutely due, we had the entire living room floor covered with pieces of paper that were actually portions of the book. Going, okay, wait a minute, no, here. Why don't we read this one? Okay, we read this one. No. Okay, yeah, right. We can put that over here, and then that chapter where we've got the multi-chapter break to make it into book 2 of the book. Yeah, we can put these over here, and then that goes over. And don't do it that way. By golly, don't do it that way.
When you write a book out of order.
I'm very suspicious that maybe not all books are alike in how they present to the writer.
What was it said? As soon as you learn how to write one book, it's over, and then you have to learn how to write another one.
Oh, I like it.
Yes.
I guess it's kind of comforting knowing they do different ways. I think we were just coming to the conclusion that not all books are alike in how they present to the writer, and Sharon had another good quote for it on the topic. So you don't write all of your books in exactly the same way either.
Yeah, I kind of do.
Oh, do you?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I start at the beginning, hopefully with the title in the first line, and then I sort of write till I get to the end. Everything in order, totally linear, making it up as I go along.
Seems unnatural somehow.
I once found a friend of mine literally in tears on the steps of the Lytton Phil Library because she had finished her book. She thought she had finished her book, but there were like 50 or 60 individual sections, and she'd written them as they came to her, and she had no idea how to fit them all together. So we spent a happy afternoon in her office, sprawled across the floor with many, many little pieces of paper, trying to make it all make sense. That was fun.
It sounds exactly what Sharon and Steve were just describing.
Yeah, absolutely.
We all have to write that book, yes.
Yeah.
Well,
that's not our usual way, but when it came down to it, that was the way that one was going to get stuck together.
However it came to us, we appreciate that you brought us Salvage Right, the 25th book now in the Liadon universe. And that's beautiful. Well done, you. Great working on the next.
Thank you. And I did want to mention the Salvage Right has an exceptionally beautiful cover.
It does. Who did it? Who did the art?
David Mattingly.
David Mattingly.
It's gorgeous.
Has he done other covers for you?
He has done most of the covers. I'm trying to think. I will say all of the covers of the novels we've done originally with Bain.
I think he missed a couple.
Oh no, he missed Fledgling.
He missed Fledgling, and I think he missed one of the Jethry covers.
Right. No, that's true. But 2 covers out of however I've done with Bain, 20 books we've done with Bain.
Well, he's done most of them, and I'm going to say this, that you can go to if you do a diligent search on David Mattingly, you can find a page where you can buy the cover art for your own walls. He sells them as prints, and he's good enough when he does his covers. He sends us print number 1.
Oh,
that's lovely.
As well he should.
Yeah, we've done 15 books with Bain.
I mean, you may have to build an extra office just to have all of the covers there. You'd almost wallpaper.
And when we were guests of honor, at in Piscataway for Heliosphere. David was the artist guest of honor, so he came out, and we had a pretty good time together talking about art and books and etc. there at that convention. And that's one of the nice things about the smaller conventions. When we were talking about convention size, that was about 300 people, maybe 350. So people had a chance to actually ask questions and follow-up questions, and to catch us on the side. And we had therefore also a chance to catch up with David and Kathleen. So the smaller conventions give you room to breathe in many ways. The conventions that we've been going to regularly for many years now is BosCon, which is a moderate size convention. It took a hit from COVID, of course.
BosCon does a very smart thing. It's a little larger than Heliosphere, but they have a living room. And it's built in as part of their space, a place with couches and things.
I could BarCon there.
Yeah, and you can sit and be reading a book or doing your embroidery or whatever, and people can come by and find you. And since this is my preferred way of being at parties, is I will stake out a place and people can come by and see me, and I don't have to go wandering around and not know where I am.
That's what I do. I stake out a table and I let everybody come, and I will buy anybody drinks who sits at my table while we chat and talk, and sometimes I write a story, and I always have such good luck there because all of my BarCon stories always sell.
Okay, great.
So I'll have to come out to an East Coast. I would be delighted to buy you 2 tasty beverages.
Thank you. We'll be delighted to accept.
Thank you so much for taking the time with us today, Sharon and Steve, and congratulations on Book 25 in Liadon.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Thank you.
You've been listening to Writers Drinking Coffee, a labor of love and enthusiasm put together by the hosts. Our main web magic is cast by Deirdre Schween, and our sound engineer and backup web spiders are David Welsh and John Smith. Our intro music and exit music are both performed by Michael Engberg. You can hear more from Michael Engberg on manyhatsmusic.com. Our podcast sponsors are Jackal Designs, The Bean Scene, Arm Street, and homage to your favorite coffee shop near you where you like writing. And hey, thanks for listening.